but like I'm terrible at cooking, but I'm a person, you know? So it's like people have their different avenues, but like that counts too.
Hey everyone, happy Thursday. Hope you guys are enjoying your June now that it's like almost over, right? I don't know where this month went, but I am enjoying this warm weather. So I hope you are too. But we are so excited. Tonight we are going to have Jennie come on and talk with us about mental health and getting the creative juices flowing. If you are in the wedding industry and you are not being inundated with crazy things going on, here's Jennie. It is absolutely insane how many weddings are popping up. People who are, pausing their wedding or now, they're kind of getting started. There she is. Oh, hold on. We're buffering. There you are.
Right.
Yay.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are
Okay,
you?
so first of all, so Jennie sent me a new photo and it had like these super cute bangs. I was like, I love them. They are so cute.
Thank you. Every day is a new challenge with these bangs. That was one of those, pandemic decisions that you're like, it's gonna be fine. And then now it's like a whole thing, but it's fine. Thank
Love
you.
it. It's like a whole style. Like
It is.
it's very cool.
Thank
Very,
you.
very cool. Love it. Love it. Love it. So I'm so excited. So if you don't know Jennie, so Jennie has Oxford Comico, which is one of my favorite like Instagram accounts to look at because there's so many different things. And so one of the things that I thought was important, I mean, everybody is crazy busy now with weddings and things are going insane. People are like, I don't know what to do. They're like, it's work. I want to take it all. But at the same time, they're kind of getting burnt out and it's only been like a month in.
Seriously, yeah.
And so, I wanted to talk a little bit. So I think one of the things that I absolutely loved and if you didn't know, Jennie was part of our bridal master class in New York it seems like I was like, oh, last fall.
I would
No,
remember what year it was. Everything is confusing. We just like blacked out last year,
I know.
basically.
I know. So it was actually 2019 where we did our bridal master class in New York and Jennie was a part of that. And so, I first got to kind of know all of the cool things. Like she does these amazing watercolors and watercolor is one of those things that like you could like watch, like I could watch it all day and just be like, ooh, that's pretty. Like it's like you see like all the colors and like how things come together and like you have to have such a vision. And it really kind of struck me as like that really is so applicable to how you run a business oftentimes. Like you have to kind of have something in your mind, you have to have a vision and know that all these parts are going to work together and create something that no one else can see. Like literally no one else can see that. And a big part of that has to do with creativity. So I wanted you to talk a little bit because I think burnout is definitely a real thing.
For real.
And being creative, like thinking of new ideas and trying new things, that can be so frustrating for people. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you stay creative because you draw, you do watercolor, you do cross stitch. Like, what am I missing? Because you do like pretty much everything.
Basically, I do lots of stuff because I get bored easily and I get burned out very easily and I get frustrated very easily. So I'm kind of like I'm definitely a Gemini in all sense of the words, but having like multiple projects at once feels like a safe way to not only like keep my attention, but if something's kind of going awry, I can just like, oh, let's abandon that for a minute and hop to something else and kind of like, restructure, like refocus, just like kind of, mixed up a little bit. But yeah, I find a lot in general that people say like, oh, I'm not artistic, I'm not creative, but anyone every day like makes a million different creative decisions. And I think when you start to frame your business that way, or even like side projects that way, and like become a creative problem solver, it helps you kind of get yourself out of ruts, or at least when you feel like, you're out of options, or I find myself often feeling like, okay, this is the only way forward in my business and that thing's not working. So like, I guess I'm stuck forever. But, when you kind of like can take a step back and think about it in a creative problem solving kind of way, or just like a different way, you can usually kind of like design your way out of problems. So that's usually my mentality in most things. And, it doesn't always work. I have burnout and overwhelm constantly, just like everyone else. But yeah, it's kind of been a bit of a relief to have not only like a literal creative practice to fall back on when like certain projects or business things aren't really going well, but I think just like kind of viewing everything like a creative project is how I like tackle everything in my life.
That's awesome. And that's so key. I mean, I love that because really I mean, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you have to be a problem solver, and to be a creative problem solver helps you not only create more solutions, more opportunities for success, but also helps relieve that stress. Because I think, like even trying something new, it's amazing how, like, even if you're like, oh, I'm a horrible drawer, I can't paint to save my life, I don't know anything about, cross stitch, or whatever it is, thinking about, okay, so totally separate from whatever other problems you're dealing with in your business. Okay, let's try to learn something new. And just like creating those new pathways of like, oh, I'm going to learn this. That doesn't work. What do I need to do? And those tools can be then transferred to everything else in your business, which I think is something that most people don't even think of. You just think like in these very like, linear terms of like, okay, this is what's going on. This is how I need to focus on it. But that's not necessarily how the brain works.
It's true. Like, there's not only one path. And I actually teach the beginner arts and craft classes at an amazing company called Craft Jam. And it's for beginners of all ages, but mostly for adults. And it's been really interesting, especially during the pandemic. We really grew because we became a total virtual business. So, virtual classes, people all over the world join, which has been really fun. But, in the beginning, I was kind of like, oh man, talk about like a necessary, non-essential job. I'm like, I teach people how to like embroider and paint. But it ended up becoming so popular and felt like so necessary for so many people to not only have the connection of, a group of people, which we obviously were all starved of for a really long time. But also, like you said, like learning something new and like challenging yourself. And, as adults, I think we shy away from trying anything new that we're not like positive we're going to be good at immediately, like painting or embroidery or something. It's been really fun to kind of like encourage people to just try. And also like, what does being good at painting mean? Like you can paint with watercolor. I always call it like very loosey-goosey and kind of wild, which is how I like it. If you're a very like kind of thoughtful, slow, methodical painter, like you can make it work for that too. And all of them are valid. Like none is better than the other, but just having the idea that you can learn something new and like maybe it's difficult and not so fun in the beginning, but you push through it. Like not only are you super proud that you kind of learned something and persevered, but more often than not, like you have kind of a fun kind of surprise that you gave yourself that outlet, and it can become something that you can incorporate just as like a fun on the side project or a relaxation tool, like kind of a meditative tool. That's why I love watercolor too. It's like can be very meditative and relaxing to just like let water and paint flow. But I think it's just like a good reminder that you can try new things. There's always like a new thing to learn, and it doesn't need to be like high pressure, high stakes, high outcome like maybe your business is. It can just be like a fun, silly thing that you do and you had fun and like that was the only goal and that's all you had to achieve and you did it. It's really nice.
Absolutely. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier in a different live about self-care and really filling your bucket. I mean, some people really, think of self-care only as like, okay, I'm going to drink a glass of wine.
Yeah.
I'm going to maybe go on a walk. This is all I'm going to do. Right. But it's crazy. So I remember when I first saw one of those like adult coloring books, and I was like, that is genius. Because first of all, how many people just like doodle when they're like doing like on a Zoom call or like in a meeting?
In a work day? Yeah, totally.
You're doodling, you're being creative, and it's actually helping, again, your neural pathways in your brain.
Yeah.
And so being able to do that, but like just coloring and thinking about, again, making decisions, solving problems, it's not life or death.
Right.
And sometimes as a business owner, every decision is life or death. And we're like, okay, if this goes wrong, then the whole world is going to come crashing down. And, and then that pressure just prevents you from actually making good decisions.
Exactly.
Sometimes a decision at all. So getting in the habit of like, doing something and realizing that like it's fun. There's this thing like color therapy is real. Like
Yeah.
being around different colors, it can just like make you happier. So like
Sure. Yeah.
why not want to do that? Like that would be
Art
that's exciting.
real, walking in nature is real. Like there's the reason that people have really good ideas when they're like in the shower, going for a walk or going for a run. It's like you're not about the thing, you're thinking about something else, and it kind of, yeah, like kind of lets the blockages out, and you can
Yeah.
rechanneling and also like learning new things and using new parts of your brain that are like unrelated to your job. But there are so many studies that show that helps you make smarter decisions for your actual job, or again, like make new connections that you can then kind of bring into your business. But yeah, it can be really, especially as like an entrepreneur, you can be very tunnel visioned of like, I have this goal and this is like, I only work in weddings, I only do this, I only do that. But trying something that maybe feels out of your comfort zone, or at least out of your business zone, can really kind of like shake things up in a good way.
That's so cool. So what are some of the things like obviously so they can take a class with you, people can
Mhm.
take a class with you. What are some other ways that you would suggest for people to kind of like dip their toe into like a fun, creative, not high stakes,
Mhm.
uh, not judgmental?
Yeah,
all the reasons that they're like, oh, I can't do that. That's not for me.
right. You
You
don't have
know,
to get good at it. You don't have to best.
right? So like,
Yep.
what are the things? Obviously, there's the classes with you. There's embroidery. There's watercolor. There's drawing. What are some other things like easy things that people can do to kind of have a creative outlet?
I think anything, like any avenue that folks are interested in, like if you think watercolor looks fun, like I always say, I'm not a supply snob. Like I started painting when I was really stressed working my fashion job. I went to the dollar store, I bought a Crayola watercolor kit, and I just painted like very messy flowers, and it felt amazing. So it's like, if there are things that you're interested in trying, you don't need to spend a lot of money and like feel like you need to take very formal classes about it. You can just like start playing, like just start, which is like the advice I say to myself all the time. And I try to other people too, like start with cheap supplies. Something like watercolor is also inexpensive. You can literally buy things at the dollar store, craft store. Embroidery is the same way. If you're not someone who loves, taking online classes, even though I typically would say I'm not that kind of person, but I do really enjoy it because sometimes I just need a little bit of like motivation and like step-by-step instruction to get over the hump of like trying something new. But you can always look up YouTube videos or just kind of like basic stitches. And embroidery is another thing that's like really affordable as a craft to start. I don't know as much about like cross stitch. I mean, knitting, there's like a million things you can do. But embroidery is like, embroidery floss is like 86 cents. You can use like a sheet in your closet and, some needles for a couple dollars and you're good to go. So I always think like low pressure also means like accessible. You don't need to invest in, a really expensive class and all these fancy supplies. You can just kind of like play with whatever you have lying around. If folks have like kids craft supplies lying around, like I think adults should like do the crafts with the kids. The kids are probably having so much fun, but like the adults can have just as much fun too. So like finger paint, make something out of like, wire, like whatever you have lying around. I just think kind of getting into the play, mentality is really just like the best place to start.
I love that. And that's so true. I mean, if you have kids at home and, I mean, obviously, virtual learning, school at home, all of those things, like just making sure that the kids aren't the only ones having fun,
Yeah.
right? Like being able to have, and I love that. I mean, who doesn't have like a pen?
Yep.
Like who doesn't already doodle? Like you can doodle. And being able to think of like things, okay, I remember when my son was younger, one of the things that he'd always be like, what should I draw?
Mm.
I want to draw. What should I draw? And I'd run out of things to like tell him to draw,
Right.
right? So it'd be like whatever's near. I'd be like, draw that plant, draw that tree, draw that person, draw that item, whatever it is, right? And
Yeah.
yes, it worked for the most part, but then sometimes it's like it's better when you like think of like an actual scene or a scenario. So draw this happening, or draw like if they're into movies, like draw the scene from this movie. Like how would you do that if it were dogs?
Yeah, your favorite character, like if you love to cook, like your favorite thing to eat. I've even seen, and I, sometimes run out of ideas too, which seems insane, but it's just like it's like the curse of the blank page. You're like ready to craft and you look at the empty thing and you're like, all of a sudden I have no ideas. But when I'm super busy, I have like a million ideas. But that reminds me, I've seen people just put like a bunch of random words, you know, like dog, cat, tree, and colors like in a basket and like shake it up and like pull two things out. And you have like green, you know, lamp. And like that's the prompt for your art project. And I've seen, you know, fine artists use these kind of tools, just like loosen up and kind of get started maybe before a big project. But that can be a fun thing to do like with kids or just, you know, with your friends. Like if you're having, you know, a get together and you're like, let's also just do something besides drink our wine, little craft project, you
You know,
know?
absolutely. Because there's, I mean, there's a reason that paint and sip is
Yeah,
like a big deal. Like
yeah,
people, it's because it's not because everyone's like ready to go, you know, quit their jobs and become artists.
yeah,
It's because it's fun. It's relaxing. There's something that's like relaxing about doing that and making, like
yeah.
being a maker. It's like that's it's part of, I think, part of our nature.
It's very human, I think, too. And that's like what I love about like craft jams kind of mentality is it's half social and it's half crafting and making. And it's kind of like reminding everyone that they're creative, like the kind of not only the relaxation meditation that comes from making things with your hands, but it does feel just like very human and like, you know, never more so than now the fact that we're all digital and virtual and like being super futuristic. I for one have like a real calling to just like I want to touch paper and like play with things with my hands because I'm just like overly teched out some days. But it's like a real like social calling for us, I feel like, and like part of history of humans is like getting together and making stuff. And I always joke too that, you know, at this point in my life, like I'm in my 30s, all my friends all of a sudden they start cooking and they're like really creative and they're baking, they're making their kids birthday cakes. And I'm like, that's creativity that didn't have an outlet before. You
Right.
have sort of kind of like energy in you that you just didn't know how to release. And cooking is kind of a way that's like really understandable, I think, for people to be creative because like we have to eat and we want to enjoy it. So it just seems like an easy foray into like being a creative person. But like I'm terrible at cooking, but I'm a person, you know? So it's like people have their different avenues, but like that counts too. And I just think, yeah, there's something inherent that wants to come out that people just don't like give themselves the permission to just like play and be creative, or they think they're not good at drawing a realistic something so they can't be an artist. But I feel like all those ideas need to go out the window and just, you know, start somewhere.
I love that. And that's that just what you said. I mean, starting somewhere, that's just a key phrase for everything.
Yeah.
Whether again, it's kind of an issue that you're having in your business, or maybe it's something new you want to implement, or a new hobby or a new goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Getting started, that's usually the hardest part because once you get started, it's not that hard. You're in that, you know, kind of mode of like doing and learning and trying and retrying. It's
Yeah.
just getting started.
Yeah. Getting the ball rolling. It's the same way with making art or like starting. Like I just finally worked on my website after like 2 years of having that on my to-do list. It took me not even that much time, but it's like, you know, all the build up and the stress of it. And then once you start, you're fine. It's the same with art projects. And you can always scrap it and start again. That is like something that a creative practice teaches us. And I feel like as a business owner teaches us because you're constantly trying something, redirecting, pivoting, trying a new thing. It's just like, it's a part of the process.
I love that. So what's your favorite creative outlet that you enjoy doing? Is it watercolor or is it like the embroidery or drawing?
I think watercolor is my go-to. I think if I'm feeling frustrated with watercolor, I'll hop over to embroidery as like kind of to mix it up. But I think watercolor is my go-to. I like how it feels. I like paint. I love color. I love texture. And I love flowers. And I can't garden, so I paint them. So I think that's, yeah, that's kind of become like my go-to medium.
What do you think the biggest mistake people make when they're like actually trying to do watercolor?
I think what was most intimidating for me to get started was trying to control and understand like the water to paint ratio. Like, how do I get it to not be like runny and kind of all my colors bleed together? Um, and I think like learning a few really simple kind of basic techniques really take away that kind of like mystery of, oh no, like how do I control this? And then it's just about, you know, practice. So I think, you know, not looking at some basic beginner techniques, I think can help or could make it less fun when you're starting off if you feel like you can't figure out how to control things. But so I think just like kind of practicing, um, beginner techniques, maybe reading up a little bit about the different supplies. Because like I said, I start with like cheap supplies and I learn later. But every once in a while, I kind of hit a roadblock and I find out that, oh, if I just change a tool or like pick a different paper, that it's all gone and I can enjoy it again. So doing a little bit of research if you're feeling frustrated, I think is a good step to take.
That's so good. And I do love like about watercolor. It is so like low entry. Like there's no bar. Like it's water and paint and a brush and some paper. Like,
Exactly.
but just like you said, there's parts where it's like, okay, so if I change the paper or I change this other tool, or it's going to make it easier, not as frustrating.
Yeah.
Definitely that as well. But you still get joy out of doing like Crayola watercolor.
I think it's always pretty. I mean, I sound like a crazy person when I'm usually like teaching, but I'm like, let's like watch the watercolor as it's drying. But like genuinely it changes. It's kind of always a surprise. And for me, the beauty of it is like letting it kind of do its thing. Like the pigment and the water always mixes in a new way. You really can't totally control it. I couldn't paint the same thing twice, like if I tried, because it's just kind of the nature of it. And for some reason, that kind of like lack of control really freed me up from trying to like be perfect and paint necessarily perfectly lifelike things and shading and all that. It's like, just like slap some color down, let it dry. It happens, you know, it doesn't need to be so serious, but I feel like it kind of freed me from some of the, you know, the hangups. But it really is like beautiful and kind of like tie-dye. Like every time you let colors mix and stuff by themselves, it's like always a surprise, but it's usually pretty cool. I feel the same way with watercolor. I very rarely, even if it doesn't come out how I want it, it's usually like still looks pretty.
That's cool. That's good. So how is that? How do you deal with that uncertainty when you're creating things like for a wedding and you have to create like more than one,
Hmm.
or do you know what I mean? And you're like hand doing every single one of them. What are
Yeah,
some that you do to like kind of control those variables?
definitely a lot of practice and patience and leaving myself extra paper for mistakes for things that I'm doing live. The good thing about like say a stationary suite is because I'm going to digitize it to make a bunch of them, I have a lot of leeway. Um, and as someone who is like non-committal sometimes, like I'm afraid to start, I want it to be perfect, you know, when I'm painting, making, you know, stationery or anything where I can digitize my watercolor and like manipulate it on the computer really takes the pressure off, because like frankly I've painted things that are not that pretty or like not the right color, and with some Photoshop I can kind of tweak them and I can assemble them in a new way in Illustrator and on the computer. So it's kind of was a fun way to use the watercolor in a new way, so it doesn't need to be perfect when I'm painting it, so it actually like kind of releases some of the stress. But definitely for things that I'm doing, like, you know, little name cards or, you know, table numbers where I'm like hand painting each one, it's like you feel really confident and you sit down to do it and you're like, oh my God, okay, we can't mess up too many of these. I only bought X number of paper, but, you know, I learned to buy more supplies so you can burn through some and it's going to be fine. But yeah, it's just kind of like getting confident and like, you know, at this point I kind of know my process and what I'm good at, so those are the projects that I take on. And if, you know, someone needs a really realistic tight watercolor painting for something, like I'm probably not your girl, and that's okay. I have a bunch of friends who like, will do it for you.
Right, right, right. That's awesome. That's so good. And one of the things that I loved about, so like I was saying, if you just joined, like I loved about your Instagram account is one, how there's just so many different types of art. And I love all of that. That's really fun to look at. And then also I love how honest you are about everything that the pandemic has been for you and that whole process. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's something that a lot of people are afraid to talk about. And it's easy to say, oh, mental health is important. But they kind of push it back and they're like, oh, but I got to hustle harder and I got to do more. And I got to, I have this whole big list to tackle today. Um, and in the process, they kind of get lost. So what were some of the things that you did that were really helpful for you?
I mean, I definitely went through periods of the pandemic of feeling like, okay, I'm going to use this time. You know, it's not really a blessing in disguise, but I can like make the best of a terrible situation. And then there are moments where I was like, I don't feel like making anything. Like, am I wasting time? Like, no, we're all in a really scary, unprecedented time. It makes sense. I don't want to like make art and figure out how to run a business. But I actually started therapy for the first time during the pandemic because I just felt like, being a maker in New York, there's a huge community of people that I usually rely on for advice and support and like fun ideas and just like a social network. And with all of that gone and people kind of leaving the city, I really felt like, oh man, I don't have anyone to talk about this stuff with all of a sudden. And I've had friends in therapy for years. I've gotten amazing secondhand therapy from all of them. I owe them a lot of money than copays I've never paid. But it was nice to just kind of like have a weekly check-in. And, for anyone who hasn't done therapy before, I definitely thought it was like, okay, I have to come in and I have to unload all my childhood up till this 30th year. And then you're going to analyze it and tell me what my parents did and what's my, but it wasn't that. Every week was like, what happened this week? How are you feeling? What projects did you work on? Was that frustrating? And it just really felt like a touchstone of when I felt myself like spiraling or like afraid or unsure if like what I'm doing is important or matters or like what's the purpose of life, all that kind of those like big picture thoughts that come into your head. Just felt like a nice touch base to have someone who was like unrelated to me just hear me and like validate, yes, those feelings are real. I'm sure you're not the only one feeling them. And like just let the feelings come through. You don't need to, like live in that moment. You don't need to push it down. You can just like feel like, yes, I'm feeling overwhelmed and sad. And like eventually it's going to pass. I'm going to go back to feeling happy and excited and like motivated. But I really like cannot recommend it enough. And it's, I haven't continued because I don't have the money, which is like such a terrible thing about American health, like a whole other thing. But, if anyone, can find something that they can afford, it's just like even a part-time kind of touch base. I feel like it also gave me some really good tools to like sit in hard feelings, work through hard feelings, and like be a little bit more patient with myself, with other people, when we like don't know what to do in all scenarios. So that really helped me. And also, leaning into the community and finding new community through virtual workshops and, doing Instagram lives with people who remind you that like, oh, right, there's like lots of fun, interesting things happening. Kind of really helped me through it. And I agree, like it just, people need to talk about the stuff that's really hard so that when you're going through it, you don't feel like you're failing or you're like not good at this or you're never going to get better at this. It's like life is hard. Running a business is confusing. No one knows how to deal with a global pandemic. So like, it's okay to feel all the feelings and, just do your best to work through them basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My degree's in psychology. So I'm the biggest supporter of therapy.
Yes.
Yes. And those are the things that, I was fortunate enough because that's my degree, but, to understand what tools there are and theories and ways of looking at things and just different things that you can use when you're going through different life situations. And you as human, like any human, it's not like that's like downloaded and programmed into your brain automatically.
I wish it was like, can we
I
get
know, right? But those are things like I think sometimes we're really hard on ourselves. Like
yeah.
I should know how to deal with this, or that this just comes with maturity. So I should know how, I've dealt with this before, so I should know. Like if you have never learned the tools that you need to deal with it, it doesn't matter how many times you go through it. It doesn't mean that you're going to learn the tools to deal with it. Like
Exactly.
you need to understand what those are. And really, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about therapy is that and some people are like, well, if I start, then I'm gonna have to go for the rest of my life. That's not true.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really just about learning those tools and getting that type of support at a time that you need when you don't have other supports.
Exactly. And I didn't really know what my goal was when I entered therapy. I was kind of like, I know myself well enough at this point that like, especially going into the winter, I was like, I don't do well in winter. I'm not a cold weather person. I have like for sure seasonal depression. And I was like, I just have a sense that I'm going to feel really lonely. And I just want to like make sure there's a net there for when those moments happen. And kind of with her, my therapist was great. She kind of, worked through like goals and over the course of, 6 to 9 months of us talking, she would kind of do check-ins of like, so when you came, these were kind of your concerns. But, because it's her job and she's good at it, she organized the nonsense that I blabbered out every week in such an interesting way that I was like, oh wow, I did like have incremental growth. You're right. I did handle this situation differently than I would have at the beginning of therapy. And it was kind of nice to have this like period of time and someone to guide you to like reflect. And she really just like helped me feel more confident that like I have the tools to handle these things and like remind me that I went through A, B, and C before and I got through it and I have learned more. And it was just kind of like such a nice like person to reflect back to you basically and to kind of just check in with that. I didn't know what to expect and know what my goals were going to be. And by the end of it, I was like, I actually feel good ending now. Like I feel like I can keep doing it. And today, you know, when I have roller coaster of emotions, I kind of just like ride through them and I feel better than I did this time last year. So that
Right.
feels like
And I think it's something that people don't, I mean, it's certainly not on most people's radar that, you know, like when you're growing up as a child, a lot of times that reflection is from a parent, like,
hmm
good job, you did that right, or you were trying and you finally did it. But then
yeah.
you're an adult and you're still going through things and you're still trying, might not be to tie your shoe, but
hmm
but maybe it's, you know, not getting frustrated when XYZ happens, or not shutting down or shutting people out when this other thing happens, or it's dealing with this other stress in a more productive way. Like whatever it is,
hmm
you know, no one else is seeing that necessarily, that growth and being like, hey, you're actually making progress. So you
Yeah.
feel like, oh, this is the same thing over and over again and I just keep failing and I'm not, you know, what's wrong with me? And that
Yeah.
really spiral you into like a whole nother
It's so true.
dimension.
Five are like so tempting too. You're like, well, this didn't happen today, and so I'm terrible, and nothing will ever get better. And it's just like perspective, you know, is what we need. But that's like a luxury of age and time, and you know, a little bit of like calm space to like think back on it. And you're not always calm enough to like have some perspective in the moment, but yeah, definitely learn those tools. And it's true. It's like who is following your journey as closely as you. You don't have like your parents, or maybe if you have a partner that can kind of, you know, remind you that, you know, a few years ago you would have loved to be in the position you are in now, but you don't always have that, you know, mirror to,
Right.
to check you in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that those things sometimes are really helpful too, because that's the encouragement that you need to
Mhm.
kind of keep going on that path. The same way that like after you learn to tie your shoe, right? Every time you tie your shoe after that, your parents weren't like, good job, you tied
Yeah.
your shoe, right? Because you were like, I got it. I know what I'm doing. And then you
Yep.
just it. So sometimes you just need kind of that person to be able
Yeah.
feel like you are making progress. You learned these tools, you're dealing with this differently, you're doing a good job, and you're like, oh, I got this.
Yeah. And you're ready to go on until the next, you know, crisis happens.
Right. And I think that's the other thing too, is like you don't have to be in therapy all the time for
hmm
years, and you can, but you don't
Yeah.
have to be, and you can always go back. That's,
Yeah.
you know, because there's always things that maybe you didn't learn this other technique that could be really helpful for this new thing that you have to deal with. And that's okay. You know, like understanding that you're not, again, like you're not born with a handbook
hmm
that's given to you to understand how you work or downloaded in your brain to like
Yeah.
automatically know, like, yes, this is exact, like all of this is right here. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, I have friends that go to therapy every week and, you know, for years and years, and that's great. And I have other folks that will do like an every other month check-in. And I've heard other people who, you know, on a yearly basis kind of have like a few follow-ups. Or if like something really dramatic happens and you need like immediate help in navigating that particular thing, I think that is probably why a lot of people maybe join. It's like something, you know, very traumatic is happening and you need to deal with it right now. But it can kind of be like a maintenance thing, or it can be like an all the time thing, or yeah, it can really be whatever you want. And it's a lot less about like, okay, let's unpack every single thing that's ever happened. It's kind of like wherever you are right now, bring that into the session. And like, you know, because I kind of felt like I had to explain how I got here and all of the, but it's like that doesn't really matter. Like what really matters is like how I am today. And as we're talking, you know, some things from the past are reflected or brought up and we deal with them, but it was really just like, who are you today? Like, what are you dealing with? And like, how can we help navigate those things? It didn't have to be this very overwhelming, like, you know, try to summarize your entire life to a stranger, you know, in 10 minutes kind of thing.
You're like, and your time's up.
Yeah,
So save that for the
I was like,
next.
all down. I was born on June 20th, 19. It's like, she's like, you don't need to do that, honey. Like, how are you?
you're like here, and you were like this book, and you're like, so this is what we should
Exactly.
They're like, whoa.
On me before we came to the session because I don't have time to recap you on all this stuff.
I love it. I love it. That's so good. That's so good. And I'm so glad because again, like those are things that number one, no one should feel ashamed for learning how to be a better human.
100%. Yeah.
And we are responsible for our own happiness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so why would we not want to take that responsibility and make ourselves happier? Like no one wants to be unhappy. I don't care who they like, no matter what they say, doesn't matter. They don't want to be unhappy.
No.
You know? So
can't take care of like other people or your business if you don't feel good or like don't feel like you can manage. And like, kind of like your comment of, you know, putting your gas mask on or your oxygen mask on before you help other people. I had friends they had the most beautiful wedding vows, and theirs were like, I promise to take care of me so I can take care of you. And I was like, that's so sweet. And like, that is what you need to promise, is like, you can't be doing anything of note if you aren't taking care of yourself first. You have like nothing to give. It's an empty vessel in all the ways. So it is like really the most important thing. And it's not selfish. It's like necessary, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think that's where, if you don't know what you need, like
Mm-hmm.
the live that I did earlier, I was talking about how you have to know yourself first. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like we were saying, like self-care is not just sitting in, you know, a tub of water and being like, yeah, what do I do now? You know,
Yeah.
or like drinking like how many glasses take until I feel better? I don't know.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's a different thing. Totally different. Totally different.
Yeah.
But those are, again, like it's understanding, okay, do I feel better after I talk with someone else and spend time with them? Mm-hmm. Or do I feel better when I'm like by myself and like reading a book, or I just immerse myself in this movie and no one else is around? I don't have to like think about the longest wedding day that you've ever had, or the longest work day, and you're like, oh my goodness, I need to like just like, what do you need to do? What is that thing that you just that you're going to complete that sentence with? I just need to be by myself, or I just need to go out with my friends, or I just need to go unload with someone. What is it? And you can be an introvert and have a connection with one person, mm-hmm. and not have to have that with 5 million people.
Right.
You can be, you know, again, like I need to be with like people and have other things going on and like not have to worry about what's going on in my brain right now. Maybe that's what you need. Mm-hmm. And that's too. So sitting in a tub of water on your 5th bottle of wine is not going to feel better. No, that's not self-care. That's like actually stressing you out. You're like, I think there's something I need to do. And I wonder what all those people outside are doing. And like, I could think my neighbor is coming home now. And like, no, like that's not helpful for you. So yeah, that's important. And then some of the other things were like making sure, I was saying that you need to make sure that you're prioritizing yourself. And that's what you were saying. Like, you know, you can't be helpful to anyone if you're not taking care of yourself first. And so I love that, you know, whether that's finding creative outlets and like, you know, filling your bucket that way, or it's, you know, going to therapy. What is it that's going to really help you? That's what you need to make sure that you're doing. And the third thing that I said earlier was, you know, being accountable to yourself. So like giving yourself some type of reward, making yourself accountable for keeping yourself prioritized.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like half of my successes are like me outsmarting future me. It's like, you know, you're going to quit 10 minutes in this project unless you had like delicious coffee and afterwards we're going to watch Bravo. So it's like, I feel like this whole past year has just been like, instead of trying to fight all of my natural inclinations and these patterns and these cycles that I keep finding myself in, it's like, okay, how can I outsmart future me to like get around those things, you know? But it's true. It's like, I know my pattern. I know what I like and I don't like at this point. So instead of hating myself for it, or it's like, I know I can work nonstop for 5 hours and then I'm done. I'm done for the day. I'm tuckered out. I'm watching Bravo. I'm going for a walk. Like, I can't do any more work. And that's just how it is. I don't like getting up early. I never have. I never will. Like, leave me alone. It's not going to happen. I can't work that way. And just accept it and kind of like work around the parameters. But you're right. You do have to take time to kind of like identify what those things are and like not fight them, just kind of like lean into them and like nurture them in healthy ways, or, you know, outsmart yourself by giving yourself rewards and time off and whatever you need to do.
I love that. And that is key. You have to outsmart yourself that you know is going to be coming around the corner in 10 minutes, because that was pretty smart, you know.
Exactly. You
I'm
always figure that
fooled by
out.
my future self
Yeah.
many times.
Yeah.
Many times.
It's so true. She's so sneaky. And it's true. It's like being accountable to yourself. It's like I set goals, but then I give myself some leeway. Cause like I was listening to one of my other favorite podcasts is Creative Pep Talk. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Andy J. Pizza. He's an illustrator and a storyteller, but he talks about, you know, whenever you like don't accomplish a goal, that's because like the other shadow version of you fought against it and like won. So it's like technically you still won, but like the version of you that you didn't mean to win won.
Right,
So
right.
like, think about that. I'm like, even if I don't accomplish the goal that I set for myself, like a part of me procrastinated it really successfully, but I'd like to switch on. So it's kind of like, you know, making that balance and being accountable to yourself, like, and understanding yourself.
That's it. Like, and understanding yourself so well that you know what
Yeah.
that in 10 minutes is going to be, what, you know, what excuses it's going to come out, you know, you know it.
Yeah.
Them down before they even start.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Absolutely. And that's, you know, and that's the thing is, you know, when it comes to getting anything done, we have to know what motivates us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to be the same for everyone. We have to know ourselves. So like waking up early or staying up late or only working 5 hours. I was saying earlier, you know, it's kind of like feel like, oh, I feel bad I'm a brunette.
Right. Yeah. Really.
That's just you. I feel bad that I'm only 5'2.5".
Right.
Actually, I do feel bad about that, but that's not in that way. I just kind of feel bad. I wish I were a little taller. But you know, like, you feel bad. Like, oh, I feel bad. You feel guilty. Why? Because somebody else is 5'5", 5'7", 5'9". I'd love to be. No, guess what? You're not. So accept it, embrace it, work
Yeah.
it. You know, like
So
morning,
much.
night, whatever type of person you are. 5-hour workday, 12. That's great. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you're better.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like there's not one right way to do anything was like such a game changer to me, because I always just, especially as like, you know, I always imagined I'd work in like a corporate job, and I worked in corporate fashion. So it was like 9 to 5, I'm at a desk. And I was like, I hate this, but like, I guess this is what everyone does. And this is, so it's like, I guess I just have to be miserable forever. Oh, because like, guess what? There's so many other ways to do things. But until you kind of like have that creative mindset or like look outside, you know, you might feel kind of stuck. But I think it's the same way about like embracing whatever your working style or your weird quirks are. It's like you could spend all the energy hating yourself for being that way, or you could just like embrace it and kind of use it to your advantage and like find creative ways to, you know, make that not be a bad thing, or just like, you know, accept it at least. But yeah, wish I were, but, you know, I'm 5'4".
Taller than me.
I know.
Yeah. Right. But those are the things. Sometimes I think we beat ourselves up against these kind of like, you know, ridiculous, unrealistic goals that don't necessarily get us any further towards the bigger goal that we might have.
Right.
And so understanding that you don't have to be 5'8". Might be nice. You don't have to be 5'8" to
Exactly.
accomplish XYZ. Right. Yeah. So yeah.
Sure. Too. Yeah, no, it's so true. And I that's why I love hearing stories about people who kind of like made, you know, felt like they didn't fit in some way or some avenue that they really wanted to pursue, and kind of like made their own rules. Like that's always been the stories I was attracted to, and the people that I love hearing from, and like their creative journey or their career journey or personal stories, whatever. But so I just feel like I never have enough reminders that there's always a different way to do things, and you don't have to fit any certain mold, you know, in your career, how you look, in your relationship, whatever. Like you can always literally do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anyone. And but it's like no matter how old I get, I still need those reminders, which is why I love hearing other, you know, creative life stories, basically.
That's so good. That's so well, thank you for sharing yours with us tonight. This is so fun. And hopefully I can see you in person like someday soon,
I
right?
know. Like you reminded me that weddings are happening because I have just like not. I know if anyone else has felt like they haven't reopened when the world is reopened, but I only like just today was like, all right, weddings. I designed wedding stationery. Let's do this. But you reminded me. I was like, yep, that's my job. I got to get back to it now.
But I think that's the other part of like, okay, so there are these opportunities, but what and this is a discussion that we had with the ladies from WPIC. It was like, just because you can
Mhm.
doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Just because you can be busy doesn't mean that you're being productive. It doesn't mean that you're helping yourself. Money is money, and there will
Yeah.
always be opportunities for more money.
Hmm.
How much of yourself are you giving away? How much of yourself are you essentially like killing,
Hmm.
not see another day because you're literally burning out faster and faster and faster the more and more and more you take on. And if people have learned nothing from the pause the pandemic has given us, it be that, you know what, life is short, and you need to understand that you are a priority. Like,
Hmm.
your life is a priority, your happiness is a priority, all of the things that you need to survive and give to the world, that's a priority.
Hmm.
We want you to be your best you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, it was scary as people, professionals whose businesses were struggling or non-existent last year. And the impulse is very quickly out of fear to like grab every opportunity and yes, yes, yes. And I'm busy all the time. And like, we don't have to. We don't have to do that. I mean, for money, obviously, there's a certain limit you need to reach, but I agree. It's like all about now kind of prioritizing what you want to do and what's like worth doing. And I just like wish for everybody less of everything, but like more quality of that thing. Less work, but like really quality jobs that you love. Like less buying stuff you don't need, but just like really loving the few things that you need to buy. Like it just the quality and not quantity thing, I feel like is the mentality I've adopted now.
That's so good. That's so good. I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining tonight. And thanks for joining us. If you joined in late, make sure that you watch from the beginning. We're going to be posting this on our account. And you can find Jennie at OxfordCommaCo
Mhm.
on Instagram and follow all of her amazing creative inspirations. I love to like, I'll just sit there like look at the same post because I'm like,
But I just wanted to bring joy to someone's scroll. There's lots of crap going on Instagram. I just want something pretty to pop up and bring you joy. So that's the goal of my Instagram account.
you have achieved your goal because I literally am like, ooh, that's pretty.
I'm so
Nice.
thank you.
I love it. All right. Well, have a great night. Thanks for joining. And everyone, again, you can find Jennie at Oxford, Co. And my name's Megan with the Bridal Masterclass. And we had Jennie on talking all about self-care and mental health, which I think is such an important topic. So thanks so much for doing that.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.